You know, when you think about a fortress falling, you probably picture armies and catapults. But what if the most powerful fortress could fall without a single stone being thrown? We're going to unpack the wild story of how one of Europe's greatest intellectual strongholds wasn't conquered. It completely changed itself from the inside out. This is the story of Geneva.
See, for more than 150 years, Geneva wasn't just a dot on a map. It was an idea. A citadel, really, with theological walls built by giants like John Calvin and Theodore Beza. It was the international headquarters for a very specific, very tough version of Christianity called Reformed Orthodoxy.
And the change that happened there? It was absolutely massive. In just 100 years, the city's entire way of thinking just flipped. The Geneva of 1650 was all about God's absolute power and super strict doctrine. Fast forward to 1750, and it's all about human reason and being morally moderate. We're talking a complete 180.
So that brings us to the big question for this whole explainer. How on earth does that happen? How does a fortress of ideas built up for generations just crumble? Not from an attack from the outside, but from a revolution brewing right there within its own walls.
All right, so to really get how big the fall was, you first have to see how high they were flying. Let's rewind and take a look at Geneva when it was at its absolute orthodox peak, a time when its theological walls looked like they could never be breached.
So what exactly were they defending so fiercely? The system called Reformed Orthodoxy. It was incredibly detailed. And the big, central pillar holding the whole thing up? Predestination. The idea that God is absolutely in charge of everything, especially salvation. And this wasn't some fuzzy feel-good belief. Oh no, it was spelled out in meticulous detail and argued with razor-sharp logic.
And boy, did this system have a defender, a guy named Francis Turretin. He saw some new ideas starting to challenge the old ways, and he was like, nope, not on my watch. So he helped create this thing called the Formula Consensus. You can think of it like a doctrinal loyalty oath that all the pastors had to sign. The gates of the fortress weren't just closed, they were bolted shut.
But you know how it is. You can build the highest walls in the world, but you can't stop the wind from changing. A whole new intellectual vibe was sweeping through Europe, and it found its way right into Geneva, thanks to one very influential guy.
Enter Louis Tronchin. He shows up with a totally different set of tools in his intellectual toolkit. He was all about championing human reason, using modern philosophy, and he even told his students, hey, it's okay to question tradition. He also pushed for a softer take on predestination and said we should only unite around a few fundamental ideas. You can almost hear the quiet tink-tink-tink of a hammer chipping away at that solid stone foundation.
So as these new ideas start to catch on, you've got one man standing there trying to hold back the tide. He's pretty much the last major defender of the old guard, fighting tooth and nail to protect the legacy he inherited.
And this is where the story gets really juicy. The whole conflict basically boils down to two men. On one side, you have Benedict Pictet, who's the nephew of the great defender, Francis Turretin. He's trying to keep the old ways alive. But on the other side, and you can't make this stuff up, is Jean-Alphonse Turretin. That's right, the great defender's own son. He saw himself as a liberator, and his main goal was to destroy the very doctrinal pledge his own father had built. Talk about family drama.
And if you want to understand what Pictet was fighting so hard for, you just have to read his own words. This quote gets right to the core of it. Why was Peter chosen and not Judas? The answer isn't about human logic on merit. It's simply because that's what God wanted. I mean, that's pretty hardcore. It's stark, it's absolute, and it was the very thing he was trying to protect.
And looking back, people really saw him as the end of an era. As one translator later put it, Pictet was basically the last of the Mohicans for Geneva's old-school theology. After he was gone, things really started to go downhill, at least from that perspective.
So remember, this wasn't some outside army attacking the city. No, the most dangerous revolutionary, the one who had finally dismantled the fortress, the call was coming from inside the house.
Yep, the man who was about to liberate Geneva was Jean-Alphonse Turretin. And his father? Francis Turretin, the architect of the fortress's strongest defenses. The battle for the soul of Geneva was literally a father-son conflict.
And Jean-Alphonse wasn't gentle about it. He didn't just disagree with his dad's theology, he openly mocked it. He basically painted it as this horrible idea that God just creates people so he can enjoy watching them suffer forever. It was a really powerful and frankly brutal rhetorical attack that hit right at the heart of the old system.
And you know what? It worked. In 1706, Jean-Alphonse got his wish. The Formula Consensus, his father's Great Wall, was officially abolished.
Pastors didn't have to sign it anymore. The main gate of the fortress was now officially kicked wide open.
With that main line of defense just gone, the consequences came fast. It was like a cascade. The whole theological landscape of Geneva started changing at a speed that would have been totally unthinkable just one generation before.
You can actually trace the dominoes falling. It starts with a slightly softer view on predestination. Okay, no big deal, right? But once you soften that, it's hard to make everyone sign a super strict oath, so boom, the oath is gone. That throws the doors open to Arminianism, which is all about human free will. And if human will and reason are the most important things, it's a very short leap to rationalism where human reason is placed above the Bible. And from there, you end up questioning everything, even core beliefs like the Trinity.
The final stage of this transformation really came to a head under a guy named Jacob Vernet. By the time he was in charge, the core beliefs that had defined Old Geneva for over a century were just gone. The Trinity? Denied. Election? Well, that's just God knowing in advance who would choose him. Christ? Just a sort of divine messenger. And predestination? Yeah, we don't talk about that. Christianity had been boiled down to a simple recipe: morality and moderation.
So why are we talking about this? Why does a story from centuries ago even matter today? Well, because what happened in Geneva isn't just a dusty history lesson. It brings up these huge, timeless questions about what we believe, who we are, and how we deal with change.
I think one historian summed it up perfectly. The city that was once famous for the preaching of John Calvin, this model city of rigorous faith, had become a little Paris, a hip center for Enlightenment philosophy and culture. The change was total.
And here's the haunting part. Benedict Pictet, that last guy defending the old walls, he totally saw it coming. Years before it all went down, he warned about these new ideas and said he dreaded even worse things. He could feel that the mood of the century was all about innovation, and he correctly guessed where it was all headed. His words turned out to be tragically prophetic.
And that leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? The reformers in Geneva, guys like Jean-Alphonse Turretin, they weren't villains in their own story. They truly believed they were saving Christianity by making it more rational, more acceptable to the modern world. They thought they were adapting. But in the process, did they end up abandoning the very things that made them who they were? So the story of Geneva kind of forces us all to ask, for any institution, for any set of beliefs, where's that line?